Someone told you that you were so mature for your age, and you smiled, maybe even felt proud. But here's what nobody told you. That wasn't a compliment. That was a red flag wearing a costume, because somewhere along the way, a child had to disappear so that a tiny adult could take their place. They learned to read the room before they learned to read a book. They learned to manage other people's emotions before they even understood their own. And if that sounds familiar, if something in your chest just tightened, I need you to stay with me. Because what we're about to unpack could be the most important thing you've heard about yourself in a long time. We're going to talk about what it really means to grow up too fast. Not just the psychology behind it, but why you are the way you are. Why you feel exhausted even when nothing happened. Why saying no feels like a crime. Why you take care of everyone except yourself. And most importantly, what it actually takes to come back to the person you were always supposed to be. Let me paint you a picture. A 7-year-old sits at the kitchen table, not doing homework, not playing. They're watching their parent cry and trying to figure out what to say to make it stop. Or maybe it's a 10-year-old who learned never to bring their problems home because home was already full of problems. So they became the quiet one, the good one, the one who never needed anything. Or maybe it's a teenager who became the emotional backbone of the entire family, the one everyone called when things fell apart, the one who held it all together while quietly falling apart themselves. These children didn't lose their childhood to poverty or disaster alone. They lost it to a much more invisible force, emotional labor they were never supposed to carry. Psychologists call this parentification, when a child is placed, consciously or not, in the role of the emotional or functional caregiver. They become the listener, the peacemaker, the fixer, the one who makes sure everyone else is okay. And the cruelest part, nobody meant to do it to them. Most of the time, it wasn't intentional. It just happened. Parents were struggling. There was no one else. And this child, this capable, sensitive, perceptive child, stepped up. Because that's what they did. They stepped up. But here's the question I want you to sit with. Who stepped up for them? Here's where it gets really important. Because this isn't just emotional, this is neurological. When a child grows up in an environment where they must constantly monitor the emotional temperature of the room, their nervous system adapts. The brain learns, this world is unpredictable. Stay alert, stay ready, don't relax. That hypervigilance, that constant scanning for danger, for mood shifts, for what's coming next, becomes wired in. And it doesn't just switch off when the child grows up. It follows them into adulthood, into relationships, into the workplace. Have you ever walked into a room and instantly sensed the tension before anyone said a word? Have you ever known someone was upset even when they insisted they were fine? That's not a superpower. That's a survival skill, born out of necessity. Dr. Bessel, one of the world's leading trauma researchers, spent decades studying what stress and early emotional burden does to the body. The conclusion? The body keeps a record of everything. Every time you suppressed your own needs to meet someone else's, every time you held yourself together when you wanted to fall apart, it's stored quietly in your muscles, your posture, your breathing, your reactions. And this leads us to something most people never connect to their childhood. The exhaustion that has no explanation. The anxiety that shows up out of nowhere. The way you feel responsible for how everyone around you is feeling. That's not a personality flaw. That's a nervous system that never got to rest. So, what does that child look like when they grow up? They look like the friend who everyone calls in a crisis, but who has no one to call in their own. They look like the partner who bends over backwards to keep the peace, even when they're the one being hurt. They look like the employee who takes on everyone's workload and then apologizes for not doing enough. They look like someone who genuinely cannot figure out what they want, Because for so long, wanting things felt dangerous. Wanting things meant being a burden. There are two patterns that tend to show up most. The first is hyper-independence, the belief, deep and unspoken, that needing people is weakness, that depending on someone only leads to disappointment. So they do everything alone. They handle every problem alone. They process every emotion alone. And when someone offers to help, they freeze, because no one has ever offered that before, and they don't quite know what to do with it. The second is people-pleasing, the compulsive need to make sure everyone around them is comfortable, even at their own expense, saying yes when they mean no, shrinking themselves in conversations, apologizing for existing, feeling physically anxious when someone seems displeased with them. Both patterns have the same root. A child who learned that their worth was conditional on what they gave, not on who they were. And so they kept giving, and wondering why they always felt so empty. Here's something that doesn't get talked about enough. People who grew up too fast often carry a very specific kind of grief. A grief for something they can't quite name. A sadness that doesn't make sense because nothing terrible happened. No single event. No dramatic moment, just a slow, quiet loss of childhood, of play, of safety, of being allowed to not know things, of being allowed to be little. And this grief is complicated by guilt, because somewhere inside they believe they chose to grow up, that they wanted to be helpful, that they should be grateful. After all, look how capable they became. But grief doesn't care about logic. And at some point, usually in adulthood, triggered by a relationship, a loss, a moment of unexpected stillness, it surfaces. Unexpectedly. Overwhelmingly. The child who never got to cry finally starts crying, and they don't know why, and they can't stop. That's not a breakdown, that's a beginning. So here's a question I want you to genuinely sit with, and maybe even write down before this video ends. What did you have to give up in order to be loved? Not to answer it right now, just to hold it. Because the answer to that question is often the very thing that needs the most healing. Now, let's talk about what actually helps, because this isn't a video that ends with, "You had a hard childhood, good luck." There is a way through, and it's not as mystical as it sounds. Step 1 is recognition, not blame. Not reopening wounds for the sake of pain, but honest recognition. The acknowledgement that what happened to you was real, even if no one called it trauma, even if it looked fine from the outside, even if the people who did it loved you deeply and didn't know any better. Recognition is simply this: I carried something as a child that wasn't mine to carry, and it affected me. And that's okay to say out loud. Step 2 is reparenting. This is the practice of consciously giving yourself what you didn't receive. It sounds simple, it isn't. It means asking yourself what you need, not what you should need or what's reasonable to need, but what you actually need. And then taking it seriously. It means letting yourself rest without earning it first. It means speaking to yourself the way a good parent would speak to a frightened child. Gently. Patiently, without conditions. It means sometimes just sitting down and being still, and not filling that stillness with productivity or service or worry about someone else, and letting yourself simply be. Step 3 is learning to receive. This is the hardest one for most people who grew up too fast. Giving is easy. They've been doing it since they were small. But receiving, accepting care, accepting help, accepting love without immediately wondering what they owe in return, that's the work. It will feel awkward. It will feel undeserved. Do it anyway, because the part of you that believes love must be earned, that part is still a child, and it needs you, the adult you, to show it a different way. I want to say something directly to you. Not to a concept, not to children who experienced parentification. To you. You were not given too much responsibility because you were strong enough to handle it. You were given too much responsibility because the adults around you didn't know what else to do. The strength you developed, you built that yourself, under pressure, without a blueprint. And yes, that strength is real. The resilience, the empathy, the ability to hold space for others, the depth of feeling you carry, all real, all extraordinary. But it is not all you are. You are also allowed to be tired. You are also allowed to need things. You are also allowed to set something down that you have been carrying since before you knew what weight was. The child inside you is not gone. They are just waiting for you to finally turn around, to look at them with softness instead of shame, and say, I see you. I've got you. You don't have to do this alone anymore. If this video reached something in you, something you haven't let yourself feel in a while, I want to ask you to do 3 things. 1. Drop a comment below. Just one word. Whatever this brought up for you. You don't have to explain it. Just name it. You'll be surprised how many people write the same word. 2. Share this with one person you think needed to hear it. Not as a hint, as a gift. 3. If you're ready to go deeper, The Drama of the Gifted Child by Alice Miller, Homecoming by John Bradshaw, and The Body Keeps the Score by Bessel are 3 of the most honest, healing books ever written on this subject. You grew up too fast, but healing doesn't have to. It's never too late to come home to yourself.